They told us yokai were just myths, folklore, shadows of a superstitious past. But what if that was the cover story? What if these beings, strange, ancient, and disturbingly consistent, were not imaginary, but remembered? Not invented by culture, but inherited from a forgotten world. One that still breathes just beyond the edge of our perception. Across centuries, they've taken many forms. Gods, monsters, ghosts, protectors. They don't vanish, they adapt. And as our reality fractures, through screens, through trauma, through dreams, they are coming back, not to entertain, to be seen. Because yokai were never just stories, they were the warning. And we were the ones who forgot what lived beside us. In Japanese folk tales, they appear comical, bizarre, even harmless. In anime and comics, they're portrayed as playful tricksters or eerie shadows with big eyes and wild grins. But step outside the noise of modern culture, into the ancient forests of Honshu, into the forgotten shrines and abandoned paths, and their image changes drastically. Yokai, a term often translated as ghost, demon, or monster. But those words fall short, because yokai are not mere characters of folklore. They are fragments, leftovers of a reality that may have once stood parallel to ours. A reality that still bleeds through in places where the veil is thin. This story isn't about fairy tales. It's about something older than recorded history. Something systematized, yet hidden. Dismissed, yet persistent. These beings were once worshipped, feared, bargained with. Some were gods. Others were devourers of souls. And while empires rose and fell, while religions conquered and collapsed, yokai remained. Why? Why do thousands of eyewitness accounts across Japan describe the same entities with eerie precision? Entities with distinct behaviors, motives, and even territories. Why are so many yokai connected to water, thresholds, darkness, and dreams? And why do those who claim to encounter them often vanish, lose their minds, or return different? Perhaps yokai are not just myths. Perhaps they're the echoes of a civilization long buried, one erased from textbooks, but preserved in whispered warnings. Or maybe they are what remains when dimensions overlap, when something not meant to exist in our world slips through a crack. If that's the case, then the question isn't whether yokai are real. It's whether we've been conditioned to forget that they ever were. Long before the term yokai was popularized, Japan was a land of animism. Every river, tree, and stone had a spirit. The boundary between the natural and the supernatural wasn't a wall, it was a membrane, permeable, alive. And it is from this fluid threshold that yokai emerged. But the deeper you look, the more the story distorts. Yokai are not chaotic by nature. They're categorized, indexed, described with astonishing consistency across centuries and regions. Entire scrolls from the Edo period attempt to classify them by behavior, habitat, appearance, even by threat level. This isn't the behavior of myth, it's the trace of observation, as if ancient people were documenting encounters, not fabricating legends. We have the Tengu, winged humanoids dwelling in remote mountains, often abducting travelers or training warriors in secret. The Kappa, water dwellers with a hollow in their skulls, holding life-giving fluid, who challenge humans to battles of wit or strength. The Naparabo, faceless apparitions, who appear normal until you look again. And dozens more. But here's where it gets stranger. These entities follow patterns. They appear in specific locations, at certain times, under certain conditions, full moons, misty nights, liminal hours, when the world transitions between light and dark. Some avoid confrontation. Others are drawn to particular human emotions, guilt, pride, lust, shame. Such behavior suggests more than fiction. It suggests systems. Civilizations don't create complex ecosystems of creatures without purpose. Unless these weren't creations. They were records. The same way medieval bestiaries mixed real animals with dragons, perhaps yokai catalogs were preserving something once real, distorted by time, but not invented. And why did these beings so often serve dual roles? Some yokai were revered as protectors in one village and feared as devourers in another. It echoes the way ancient gods could be both wrathful and benevolent, or the way a being might appear differently depending on who is perceiving it. Maybe yokai weren't just seen. Maybe they responded to perception, and that opens an entirely different door, one that leads towards something interdimensional. In the dim corridors of conspiracy lore, there's a pattern few dare to trace: the overlap between ancient legends and modern anomalies. Yokai, for all their folkloric dressing, begin to look eerily familiar when seen through this lens. Not like ghosts or spirits, but like something else entirely. The Tengu, for example, described as humanoids with elongated features, powerful wings, and the ability to vanish at will. They live on remote mountaintops, avoid human society, yet sometimes abduct individuals, returning them later, altered. Some claim to have been trained by them. Others speak of tests, challenges, even downloads of strange knowledge. Swap the feathers for suits, and you're not far from the stories of alien contact. Then there's the Nurakabe, an invisible wall that appears at night to block travelers, disorienting them completely. Victims describe a paralyzing, immovable force that vanishes as suddenly as it comes. In alien abduction lore, such phenomena are identical: unseen energies freezing time, inducing confusion, and then fading without trace. Even the Naparabo, those faceless beings, bear resemblance to the so-called Greys. Blank expressions, smooth features, no recognizable human emotion. Some abductees recall waking to see such figures at the foot of their bed, radiating a calm terror that is neither human nor demonic. But the most disturbing parallel lies in behavior. Many yokai are not overtly malevolent. They observe, test, interfere in moments of transition, like scientists or gatekeepers. And then there's the dream connection. Just as yokai often appear in moments of altered consciousness, twilight hours, sleep paralysis, or deep forest trances, modern contactees describe their experiences as dreamlike, distorted, difficult to distinguish from reality, a shared psychological territory, a common entry point. Is it possible that yokai were early manifestations of the same phenomenon we now label extraterrestrial? Or were they the original form, later reinterpreted through a technological lens? Japan, with its ancient geomagnetic anomalies, mountainous interiors, and long cultural memory, may be one of Earth's natural portals, a thin place, and the beings that slip through it adapt to the era they enter. In feudal times, they were yokai. Today, they're UFOs, but their core remains unchanged. Legends fade, religions shift, empires fall, but yokai remain, not as dusty scrolls or ancient statues, but as living myths. They adapt, evolve, yet always return. Unlike most folkloric entities that vanish under the weight of modernity, yokai have shown an uncanny ability to survive cultural extinction. Why? In post-war Japan, during an era of rapid industrialization, sightings of yokai did not vanish. They changed. The kappa moved from rice paddies to urban waterways. The tanuki shifted from forest trickster to alleyway phantom. Even the faceless Noparabo found new relevance in stories of ghostly elevator riders and shadowy figures on surveillance cameras. It's not just survival, it's adaptation. This shape-shifting presence suggests that yokai are more than mere projections of rural anxiety. They seem to mirror the psyche of the society observing them. In eras of famine, yokai warned of greed. In times of war, they punished arrogance. In the digital age, they infiltrate through screens, dreams, and even electronic glitches. As if yokai do not belong to a single form, but to a force that responds, reacts, persists. There are even modern testimonies, unofficial, scattered, rarely publicized, of people encountering unidentifiable entities in Japan's forests, tunnels, and mountains. Stories from hikers, truck drivers, and solitary travelers who return shaken, describing creatures eerily similar to those found in ancient texts, yet laced with details no one could have invented in the 17th century. And while skeptics dismiss these accounts as cultural inertia, there's something deeper at play. A tension between memory and denial. A subconscious knowing that certain places hold more than just history. They hold presence. Active, watchful, and sometimes interactive. Maybe that's why yokai cannot be killed, because they're not bound to physical form. They may be echoes of consciousness, fragments of a forgotten ecosystem, or intelligent patterns that inhabit thought as much as space. And the more you deny them, the deeper they hide. But they do not leave. If yokai do not belong to myth, and do not behave like spirits, and do not fit the profile of traditional deities, then what are they? One theory, whispered among certain circles, dares to suggest they're not from here at all. Not here in the geographical sense, but in the dimensional sense. Not of this vibration, this frequency, this density of reality. Perhaps yokai are bleed-throughs from another realm, a parallel layer of existence that in ancient times brushed more closely against our own. Before the veil thickened, there's evidence, scattered and fragmented, buried beneath centuries of redacted history and spiritual censorship. Ancient texts refer to twilight beings who walk only between worlds. Monks recorded visions of entities that emerged during meditation, too vivid to be dreams. And in the old mountain shrines, there are carvings of figures with elongated limbs, distorted faces, and features that defy human or animal classification. They were not all feared. Some were worshipped. What if yokai were once residents of a shared Earth? A time before the great filters, before dimensional separation. A world where humans and non-humans coexisted, uneasily, perhaps, but knowingly. Then something changed. Whether it was a cataclysm, an intentional quarantine, or a natural thinning of the veil, access was lost. And what remained on our side were impressions, glimpses, visitors, remnants of a breach long sealed. But what if it's opening again? The patterns suggest a reemergence, increased sightings, more potent dreams, children describing things they shouldn't know. And in the borderlands of Japan, where old forest paths remain untouched and the sky still hums with ancestral tension, something is watching, something is remembering. This might explain why yokai often defy the binaries we assign. Not good or evil, not ghost or god. They seem bound to laws we don't understand, laws of a world just adjacent to our own, one that at rare moments overlaps. And in those moments, the yokai do not appear, they return, which leads to the final, most dangerous question. If these beings are re-entering our realm, not as fiction, but as function, what happens when the veil lifts entirely? There's a theory, rarely voiced, barely written, and instantly dismissed by anyone who serves the official narrative, that yokai are not just ancient beings. They are the memory of a broken agreement. Long ago, before history was carved in stone and sealed by empire, humanity was not alone. We shared this world, not with animals, not with spirits, but with others. Beings of form and will, who moved differently through space. who spoke not in language, but in symbols, visions, frequencies. The yokai. We feared them, respected them, built shrines to appease them, left offerings in the woods, learned their laws the hard way. And in return, they kept the balance. But something shattered that balance. Some say it was human arrogance, that we sought to dominate what we could not understand. Others believe it was an outside force, a third intelligence that pitted us against them, sowed fear, labeled the yokai as demons, and began the long erasure. Religions were rewritten. Histories burned. The yokai, once gods or guides, became superstitions. But memory is stubborn, and so they endured. In poems, in woodblock prints, in whispered bedtime warnings. Why? Because the pact wasn't entirely broken. It was buried. And now, as the fabric between worlds thins again, through dream, through technology, through trauma, the yokai are stirring, not to harm, not to save, but to reclaim what was once theirs. Some come as watchers, others as tricksters, a few as punishers, but all carry the same message. We never left. You just stopped seeing. What follows if the veil collapses entirely? If the threshold becomes a door once more? The stories suggest it won't be violence. It will be revelation, a collective remembering that fractures the illusion we've been sold. Because if yokai are real, then what else have we forgotten? Maybe they weren't monsters. Maybe we were. And maybe, just maybe, the world we think we know is just the polite version. The censored version. The version scrubbed clean of teeth and shadow. The yokai never asked to be worshipped, only acknowledged. Now they wait, just outside the frame, watching for the moment we remember. And when that moment comes, there will be no turning back.